So hi, this is Stephanie Geiger. I chose to make my Prezi about EdPuzzle, which is a tool that I use quite frequently with my students because it connects straight to the Google Classroom, and you can roster students into EdPuzzle through the Google Classroom, so it's seamless for my students. So what is EdPuzzle? EdPuzzle gives you the ability to add questions to any video, which creates an assessment. So as students are watching the video, a question pops up and it allows students to either choose their correct answer if it's multiple choice or type an answer in if it is open-ended. Assessments don't have to be formal. Just because you call it an assessment doesn't mean it needs to be graded. It could just be for student feedback to see where they're at, their understanding, their comprehension of a certain concept, or for them to be able to gain access to information and to be able to assess their understanding as they work through the material. So that's just another way to think about it. Hi, so this is the screen where you can edit a video. I chose here a YouTube video in order to use it as an assessment piece. You can see here at the top there's crop video, voiceover, audio notes, or quizzes. I'm going to be in the quizzes feature here. You can see on the slider there's a question mark, so that's going to tell me where the question in my quiz is going to go. So I'm going to focus on this quizzes piece here, and I'll go ahead and play the video. This is for a chemistry class.
In this lab, we are reacting 5 different metals in a single replacement reaction with 1 molar hydrochloric acid. From left to right, the metals are aluminum, copper, iron, magnesium, and on the end, zinc. So to each test tube, we will add an amount of hydrochloric acid.
So as you can see, there are questions here. This is an open-ended question. Here is multiple choice questions. And here is a place where students can just write a comment. So you can have an audio note and a prompt, which then allows them to have a comment, which is a different type of feedback there. I'm going to just go back to the multiple choice here because one of the great features of multiple choice, if you notice, is that you can insert a link or a picture into the question area, and you can also give instantaneous feedback. You can add as many answer choices as you like, so let's say 4, and on the incorrect answers, you can have an explanation pop up, which provides instantaneous feedback to students, which just promotes student engagement and helps them work through in a self-paced situation. So videos can be uploaded from your own uploads, YouTube, Khan Academy, Veritasium, National Geographic, and Crash Course are some of my personal favorites. But really, there are tons of different choices. There are Fast Math and lots of different places. But anything on YouTube can be uploaded, which I think seems to be, for me, what I use the most. So why would you want to use EdPuzzle? EdPuzzle gives each student their own learning experience. So normally what I would do, it would used to be in a lecture type fashion, students would sit and listen to my explanation. But now I'm increasing student engagement by each of them getting their own personalized lesson. So it's this call to action. Students sometimes need to hear it again. Sometimes students aren't paying attention when you're explaining the directions, which I find sometimes they zone out or they just don't understand. Maybe I'm speaking too quickly for them, or they just need to hear the explanation again so they can rewind and rewatch it. This helps all students, but especially my English language learners, they can listen to lectures again, rewatch, and look up information and pause as they need to. Also, my special ed and students with IEPs. And this year, for the first time, I have a hearing impaired student. so he can turn the volume up, and he doesn't need to pretend like he heard me. Instead, he actually can hear what I'm saying, and I'm inserting more closed captioning into my videos as an ADA help, like a compliance for my hearing impaired student. So it is going to increase student engagement. Multiple choice questions pop up, and they instantaneously tell students if they got the answer right or wrong. So students really like this. And students like this for a few reasons. One is because it gives them a self-check. They know right away if they're getting the material or not. And that awareness allows them to make choices about if they need to do more research, if they need to come to extra help, if they need to ask me about something in class. It helps them really take ownership of their learning. Hi, so here I am in one of my EdPuzzles that I've created for my chemistry class. And you can see from the student point of view that there's 4 sections where there are questions. So those little marks there mean that a question will come up there. In the to-do also, there are these where it tells you exactly where it is. Which is helpful too because, for example, there are 2 open-ended questions at 1 minute and 47 seconds. So that gives them a little bit of an idea of how long it's going to be until the next question. And then this is in my teacher view. The choices here actually is the duplicate feature of one of my actual lessons to make a copy of this elements video. But the other one is assigned to the Google Classroom, edit, and obviously delete, which I do. So here we go. Hi kids, it's Mrs. Geiger here. So we're going to start a new unit called the periodic table of the elements. If I can move forward right now, but students, I have it on prevent skipping, so they cannot move forward, but I'm going to do this for us to get us a little bit closer. I go over the directions of this assignment. While non-metals are said to be brittle when they're in the solid state. Take a look at the So here's a multiple choice question. Here's one of the negatives, which I'll address, of EdPuzzle is that sometimes it does a freeze frame, and depending on where you put the slider, you get a not flattering freeze frame there. But this question is actually a Regents level question. I like to pull from the standards, and this is a Regents chemistry class, so this is a Regents chemistry question, and this is, I stole this from an exam, so this gives me instant feedback on where students are, and it lets them know as well. So cell element that's malleable, good conductor, that is a metal, so I'm going to go ahead and choose metal. I can also choose rewatch, which means that it would go back to before the last question and have this whole part replay. Or I could skip this question for now and have to come back to it later. So those are the choices from the student end. I'm going to go hit submit, and then it tells me that I have 100 out of 100 and that I got it right. If you choose the other incorrect answer choices, what you put in the feedback for the comments as to why that is an incorrect answer choice is what would pop up for students, and they would see what their grade was. So then I'm going to go ahead and hit continue. Look at the following video clips and classify the elements. And you'll notice that you see at 1 minute and 47 seconds, there's going to be another question. This question.
Okay, and we also learned that metals are malleable. Do you remember what that is?
Malleable means that you can bend it into a new shape. Metals are malleable.
Okay, so let's.
So this is an open-ended question, and I'm going to go ahead and skip it.
The video clips will be numbered. We just need to decide if each clip.
So that's just an example of the different types of questions that you can choose to incorporate for students. All right, so I would say that this product is used mostly for secondary students. I happen to teach upper level, and I designed this for a chemistry class. I designed self-paced lessons, and I think that in order to be successful in those self-paced lessons, it takes students to have a high enough skill level, especially with technology. So that's why I think for this independent learning, I would target higher level students. So some of the advantages is that I've used this as one of my main tools for flipping the classroom. So, flipping the classroom is basically the recording what you would normally do in class into a video and having that assigned as homework, and then in class, um, allowing that time to be for some group work activities or things, problem solving activities that you would normally do for homework. So, flipping the classroom, EdPuzzle allows me to really just revamp some of the lessons that I already have, and just take lectures that I've already created and convert them into a new lesson that is self-paced and individualized for students. So hi, this is a lesson that I used to do in my chemistry class as a demonstration as well as a lecture. So what you can see here is a picture-in-picture view. This camera I actually have facing outward at my countertop where I have some chemicals in view. And then here you have a reference table from the chemistry reference tables, table G. So table G I'm going to be writing on and using during the lecture here. You'll notice that it's also uploaded to my YouTube channel. I do this to prevent access issues. Sometimes students have trouble logging in with Google. If a student, for example, this just happened, student transferred into my class and I had not yet put him into the EdPuzzle classroom. I hadn't rostered him. And so he was not able to get onto EdPuzzle, but he was able to access the lesson in another way without the embedded questions, but he still got the concept, and then I was able to add him and he could go back and complete those assessment questions. But he still had access, so that's my point. Additionally, some of my students like to watch them ahead of time just because they're all on my YouTube channel and they're only about 5 or 10 minutes long. So sometimes they'll just start watching videos that are posted there, which is kind of a nice preview to the material as well. So lots of different ways that that's helpful. So we're going to go ahead and start the video.
And today we are going to be looking at table G. So take out your reference tables and turn to table G.
So you'll notice that I'm instructing them like I would in class.
Focusing on a substance called sodium nitrate. So find the line for sodium nitrate.
So just like I would in class, we're reinforcing naming of compounds. And here I am, I'm writing on my device actually that I'm using.
Alright, so you want to focus on the line for sodium nitrate. It's confusing as far as graphs go because there is so many different lines, but
so I go over how to read the graph, and then I start to measure out a certain quantity, and we do some math, some calculations there.
I'm going to pause and come back when this has all dissolved because I'm just stirring.
So
we're back, and you can see that this is now a homogeneous mixture.
So a lot of vocab there going over and reinforcing that like I do in class, which is really important for my students to hear the vocabulary and context from me and from my voice. But what I wanted to show you in that little piece is that in class, when I do this as a demonstration, one of the killers of my lesson is that I need to dissolve this salt. It takes a long time to do that. So I have to fill that time by transitioning, and it becomes confusing. This allows me to kind of manipulate the science, manipulate the situation in a way that works and doesn't, it doesn't break up the lesson and distract from the lesson because my students are waiting for that to dissolve. So this is a good example of how I've used EdPuzzle just simply to take a lesson that I used to do and revamp it and give every student their own little personalized lesson there. So each student gets an individualized lesson and an individualized assessment. So another great feature of EdPuzzle, and one of the reasons that I use it so much while flipping the classroom, is my ability to embed questions. And I used to ask these open-ended questions, and one student or maybe 10 students would raise their hands, and I would call on one of them. Well, now I've assessed the understanding of that one student. EdPuzzle allows me to assess all of my students on the same information in the same lecture, and there's no opt out. Students can't say, I don't know. Students can't look at their shoes and never get called on. The conversation is not dominated by one individual, but instead, every student is expected to answer every question. So here is an example of that. I'm going to try to get close without going over.
An amount that's less than the limit. It's not totally full. All right.
So there was a question. I explained what unsaturated was and then defined unsaturated in terms of solutions. So I not only asked what unsaturated meant, the meaning of this term, but I also put it in terms of, which makes it more of a regions question.
All right, so the term saturated basically means full. So if I wanted to make this a saturated,
I'm going to go forward to my next question, which is a similar.
Until you get to the NaNO3 line. Follow it across to the y-axis.
So I'm teaching them how to solve a certain type of question
how many grams of sodium nitrate
using this reference table.
How many grams of sodium nitrate need?
So how many grams of sodium nitrate are needed to make a saturated solution at 40 degrees Celsius and 100 grams of water? So this is another type of regions question. I'm using the actual sodium nitrate in 100 grams of water at 40 degrees Celsius. I've measured everything and done the actual question in real life, and then I'm teaching them how to use the table to solve that type of question. So that's the application here. One of the disadvantages here happens to be, again, moving the slider. My students gave me feedback that I don't finish the question on the video before it pops up in this example. So that's one of the things that's very hard to get using this slide bar on the bottom.
Need to be in the solution to make it saturated.
So there is the rest of that question. So one of the beauties of EdPuzzle for me and flipping the classroom in general has been capturing the moment. I never have to take out those chemicals again. I never have to set them up. I never have to clean it up. It's less mess for me, but it's also better for the environment. I'm not making reactions happen just to see them happen, but instead I can just have students watch the demonstration. Now, there's some demonstrations that I still do because they give off heat and I want students to feel them, or there's certain reasons why I might do something as a demonstration, but typically those are either labs, if it's necessary for them to do it and have the sensory experience, then that's a lab. If it's a demonstration, it can usually get turned into a video because they're not close enough to the reaction anyway. And so it's better for the environment. I can spend more time in class interacting one-on-one with students. So if it's any type of whole class instruction, I usually can turn it into a video. And it's great for chronic absenteeism. I have some students who have health problems and they are absent a lot. And they can still stay up to date with the material and they can work at their own pace on it. So those are a lot of my advantages. My disadvantages are access mostly. Students need to have a device with internet in order to be able to use this. I'm very lucky in that I have laptops in my classroom, so students are allowed to come in. I have headphones that they can use, and they can watch these videos during my extra help or during one of their free periods. And that is a big advantage for me. But if you don't have that, I mean, EdPuzzle is still accessible on their mobile devices, but then they have to download the app, and some students don't want to do that, and I don't want to force them to do that. So that is a sticking point. But in secondary school, I just feel like sometimes it's better to put it back on the students and say, there are computers in the library. I have computers in my classroom. If you don't have a computer at home, you need to figure out how to get to the library and use one of the computers there. So that is the biggest issue I have. The other one are technical difficulties. So the slider is very sensitive, and I sometimes have trouble getting it in the right spot. The Google Classroom sync sometimes is problematic, and EdPuzzle always generates a generic assignment name, and you need to go back into the Google Classroom and change the assignment name if you don't want it to be what EdPuzzle makes it, as well as change the instructions on the Google Classroom. So that's just an extra step that needs to get done every single time. And then student feedback that I type into EdPuzzle is never seen. My students would need to go back into the EdPuzzle app, into that assignment, and look at the feedback. And unless I prompt them to do that, it's not going to happen. So I get around this by writing feedback to my students on either a form where I have the questions printed out for myself and I can write feedback to them, or I write holistic feedback and then conference with students. So that's just another way to get around those disadvantages. Overall, though, I highly recommend EdPuzzle, and I hope